Jim, this next one from the Cult of Cornette Facebook group was sent in by Sohail Nandwani.
What?
Again, we have an international audience, a vast international...
Well, you don't gotta call him Sohail. Why, you could call him Boot Heel, or you could call him Heel.
His name is Sohail Nandwani, and I'm sure I'm butchering his name. I apologize, but his question: in your opinion, what is the most prestigious secondary title, in both singles and tag team wrestling history? For example, in my opinion, the WWF Intercontinental title is the most prestigious secondary title in wrestling history.
Well, again, in wrestling history, that takes into account 125 years or a little bit more. But also, then the secondary title has changed meaning and placement and the way that it's utilized over the period of time. All championships in the territory days, except for the world title of one of the major groups, the NWA, the AWA, the WWF, at one point in time, the WWA in California, at one point in time, the WWA in Indiana, just because of Bruiser, and a few other places here and there. Those were the world champions. Any other title anywhere in any territory was, by definition, a secondary title and admitted as such. The U.S. champion in Detroit, or the Southern heavyweight champion in Tennessee, or the Mid-Atlantic heavyweight champion in the time in the Carolinas, or when they had the North American title in Mid-South, those were all the top titles in that particular territory, but they were secondary titles to the world champion, and the fans knew that. And that's what made the dynamic of the world champion coming to face that regional title holder to see if he could win the big one in his home market. That's what made that draw. You never had, and when they appeared on the same card, when the world champion was in Florida, the main event, the NWA world title, the Florida heavyweight champion would be on the card, but he was there all the time, whereas the world champion came in and went. So you didn't have a situation like you've got it now, where the world champion in the WWE is around just as often as the Intercontinental champion or the U.S. champion, where the world champion in AEW is still on the program almost every week. Even if MJF doesn't wrestle often, he's still there with all the other mini champions in AEW. They coexist on a regular basis. That changes the dynamic. Then that really does illustrate that this guy, he's not the best that this company has, and he's got a chance against the world champion if the world champion ever comes in. It's the world champion is already here, and this guy's got a belt that's not quite as important as that. So that changes the dynamic. As far as what was the most important secondary title in wrestling history?
Prestigious.
Prestigious. I mean, let's face it. Is there a belt in wrestling history almost anywhere from any company that, you know, people walking down the street said, oh my God, just because he won that belt, he walks on water? That, you know, important for box office, important for a guy to have to further his career, important to draw money with, important to be featured on big crowds, that kind of important, or big cards rather, in front of big crowds. The Missouri heavyweight champion was for years, even though the title was only based out of St. Louis, was the stepping stone to the NWA world title. If you could go to St. Louis, win the Missouri title, and do well with it there and draw with it, that was a major stepping stone to the NWA title. At various points, not only did all of the modern NWA champions hold that title first, but guys that were in consideration for it that never quite made it, the Ted DiBiase's. Was there one or two Von Erichs that held the Missouri title at various points?
Did 3 Von Erichs hold the Missouri title?
Kerry, Kevin, and David? Did Kerry ever get it?
Yeah, Kerry definitely got it. I think. Hold on, let me look it up.
Well, while you're looking it up, then also there was the United States heavyweight title, not that the Sheik used or not in any of the other territories, but the United States title that Vern Gagne held in the days of the Dumont Network in the early 50s, which was at one point, because of the television exposure and the fact that the Chicago wrestling was the dominant network program, that title was not only seen as, but being marketed as potentially on par with the NWA World title. It was a very important belt that in the 50s was only held by Vern Gagne, Dick the Bruiser, Wilbur Snyder, the absolute top guys. Go ahead.
When they brought the U.S. title back in 75, I think it was, they had that big tournament where they brought in Terry Funk and they brought in Harley Race, I think. They brought in different people from around the country. That was the debut. Was that the debut of Blackjack Mulligan?
I think it was. He gave notice. He and Lanza were.
Did he give notice?
Yeah. Well, no. He and Lanza were tag team champions for Vince Sr., but he got the opportunity to go to work for George Scott in the Carolinas as a top babyface and saw the opportunity and took it and was wise to do so and was on top in the Carolinas for the next 5 years.
But did he give notice?
I think he did tell him. I think he did tell him I'm leaving. And didn't they drop the belts? He did business, didn't he?
Let me double check that. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure that he did. But Lanza couldn't talk him out of it. I know that much. But it was a big spot as a major single star. And the United States title then that they started in the Carolinas that replaced the more regional Mid-Atlantic title. And I think at one point they had the Eastern States heavyweight title or whatever, but.
Yeah, you're right. They dropped him on the way out. Let me ask you this. And by the way, all three of the Von Erich, well, not all three, but the three main Von Erich brothers all held the Missouri State Championship. Where are you at with the discussion of, it was an old discussion, you don't really hear it anymore, but the U.S. title for Crockett versus the Missouri Championship being the most prestigious secondary title in the NWA?
Well, and that's the thing is then it was two different things. The United States title they were using in the Carolinas, they were drawing huge money. They had a 3-state territory with multiple markets that were capable of drawing 10,000 fans or more. The Missouri title was defended in St. Louis at the prestigious Kiel Auditorium for Sam Muchnick. But he didn't have a territory. It was that title. It was that town. It was a way to go and get over in St. Louis, in the city that had been the seat not only of NWA wrestling, but St. Louis in the 40s was probably, St. Louis and Toronto were the two dominant cities for pro wrestling in North America because of the fucking incredible tear that Bill Longson went on, where he never main evented a fucking show in St. Louis through World War II that drew less than 10,000 people. But it was still only for money, for box office. You went and you made a fortune in one night, considering the, standards of the time, working a main event in St. Louis. But in the Carolinas, as the U.S. champion, you were every night, you were in Greensboro and Charlotte and Roanoke and Richmond and Norfolk and big buildings. So it was a better spot for a wrestler.